Buffalo native Robert T. Coles is the president of the firm Robert Trainum Coles Architect PC. The firm was established in 1963, making it the oldest African-American-owned architectural firm in New York State and the Northeast. Mr. Coles is a Buffalo Public School graduate who received his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1951, a Bachelor of Architecture degree in 1953 from the University of Minnesota, and his Master's in Architecture in 1955 from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was awarded the Roach Traveling Scholarship by the Boston Society of Architects in 1955 and traveled for a year in Western Europe. Mr. Coles was awarded an honorary Doctor of Letters degree by Medaille College, along with their Centennial Medal in 1975. Mr. Coles' residence and studio at 321 Humboldt Parkway received an Award of Merit for Excellence in Design from the New York State Association of Architects, and he was one of 9 honored for this outstanding work in all categories. The studio house sits in the heart of the city of Buffalo. Its unique contemporary design is situated on a flat 50-foot wide lot with 4 levels and 2,200 square feet of living space. Mr. Coles views his practice in 3 periods. The first period, from 1963 to 1976, was known as the traditional practice, where he sought individual commissions from agencies and developed them. During this period, the firm received a number of design awards from national, state, and local architectural organizations. The second period development came in 1976 after Mr. Coles spent 2 years in Washington, D.C. He was on staff of the American Institute of Architects, introducing minority firms to the concept of joint venturing, and began to make contact with some of the major firms in the nation. Mr. Coles, you have quite the legacy in the architectural field. Can you share with us how your efforts have changed the industry?
Well, I have tried to essentially bring more minorities into the field than there have been. And I think it goes back to a talk that I heard in 1968 when Whitney Young, the then president of the Urban League, spoke to the Architects National Convention in Portland, Oregon. And he said, "You have not been a profession that has distinguished yourself in solving the problems of the urban crises." And it was a very powerful, powerful speech and so forth. And I came away saying that I'm going to see what I can do to make Whitney Young's dream a reality. And in 1974, I became the Deputy Vice President for Minority Affairs of the American Institute of Architects, and I spent 2 years working on this whole issue of minority participation as such. Right. So in 1974, I became the Deputy Vice President for Minority Affairs at the American Institute of Architects, and while I was there, we developed programs that would increase the number of minorities in architecture. Unfortunately, it came at a time when we were having economic problems in the profession as well, just as we are now. And so it's very difficult to sustain programs like that when there are no funds available for it, really. I also work with professionals, black professionals, to involve them in projects that we have worked on. For instance, in 1973, we were awarded School 40, which is on Oneida and Clare Street in Buffalo. And I brought in 2 black professionals, engineers from New York City, to work on that project, since there were no black professionals here. One was Leroy Callender, a structural engineer, and the other was Wallace Johnstone, really.
His third period development commenced in 1984 when he was appointed to the New York State Board for Architecture and had the opportunity to develop a client base in New York City. As for his successful career, the astute 80-year-old believes that if you find something you like to do and pursue it with a passion, it's not work, it's play. I know you've been asked this many of times, but I have to ask, do you ever plan to retire?
No. I'm doing something that I think very few people have an opportunity to do, and that is to do something that they like to do. And I say to my students and to almost everybody, find something that you like to do and pursue it with a passion.
Absolutely.
And I've been working in architecture since, well, probably 1958, when I got my license in Cambridge and so forth. So it's really over 50 years, really. And it continues to be very satisfying.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that you do not plan to retire, because I believe that your work and your legacy should continue forever.
Well, thank you very much. And I might add that architecture is an old person's profession. Yeah. And when I say an old person's profession, is that you can continue to work at it through most of your life and so forth.
Right.
And you get Phil Johnson, who was he did the Seagram Building in New York. He died at 99 years old.
Wow.
Frank Lloyd Wright, who did
Right.
5, 6 houses there in Buffalo, lived to be into his 80s and so forth. And
Yes.
so it's really very possible. Now, this other thing I'd like to maybe correct in all is that I'm not the first architect in Buffalo.
Okay.
The first architect in Buffalo was African-American architect, was John Brent.
Okay.
And John Brent was born in Washington, went to school at Tuskegee, and then came to Buffalo in 1915.
Okay.
And I know that well because that's the same date that my father came to Buffalo. And so he and John Brent really became friends, because there are very few African Americans in Buffalo at the time, especially professionals.
Wow.
And John Brent lived to be about, I think he was probably about 80 years old. He died in 1962. I knew him because he lived not too far from me.
Right.
And I wrote actually an article about him in a dictionary on African American architects, which you might find interesting. I'll get you a copy of it.
All right, sounds good.
But we have now only 5 or 6 African American architects in Buffalo. Actually 6, including myself.
Well, I'd like to say thank you very much for allowing us into your home and into your studio, because all this information is so important to our community. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Dwayne. Yes,
We'll be right back.
I've enjoyed having both of you in.
Hi, and welcome to this month's question and answer segment, where your questions are answered and your comments are heard. Our question comes from Stephanie Jones, and it comes via our new hotline number. Stephanie asks, how are the renovated schools selected, and who ultimately makes that decision? Well, Stephanie, that is a very detailed and intricate process, and what I'll do is I'll give you a general overview of the procedure. It basically begins at the state education department level, and they require the district to conduct a district-wide planning analysis of the facilities and the student population. Then they also go and look at the grade configurations. And what we mean by grade configurations, that determines what grades are in what district, whether it's a pre-K through 4th grade, a pre-K through 8th grade, a 5th grade through 8th grade, or a 9th grade through 12th grade. These configurations are extremely important so that we don't have too many of the same grades in one district. Once that information is collected, the district then goes and looks at all of the buildings and determines which buildings are best suited for each grade configuration and student population. So ultimately, it is the district who makes that decision. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for that question. And you too can ask your questions and comments by calling our new hotline number at 218-4698. And you can also email me at mih@lpciminelli.com. Also, if you're a Facebook fan, don't forget you can become a fan and go to our Facebook page and go to the discussions tab and post your questions or comments there. Okay, coming up next, we're going to take you over to Riverside High School, where our very own LPCiminelli project manager, Tom Renato, will give us a project tour of an almost completed renovated school. So don't go away, we'll be right back. Hi, we're back, and guess what? We are at Riverside Institute of Technology, and I'm standing here with LPCiminelli's project manager, Tom Renato. Tom, thank you so much, for allowing us to come here today and tour the school again. And I have to say, I am so excited about being here because it was almost a year ago to date.
That's right.
That we were here and we, saw